This is a video summary of this gist that I'm publishing on my research for Radicle. This was a grant given to me by Radicle to research the possibility of creating a decentralized package management system. So Radicle's done a great job of decentralizing code repositories. So basically taking the functionality that exists on GitHub, which is a centralized code repository, and decentralizing it, making it so that there's no one single point of failure. And the next logical step that I've been exploring with some of the Radicle devs and other members of the Radicle team is if Radicle can store and deliver code, it should be fairly easy to store and deliver packages. Specifically, I'm a JavaScript dev, so I'm mostly focused on the JavaScript ecosystem and the NPM package manager. NPM is a wonderful service, but again, it's a centralized service just like GitHub. So it would be great if we had a decentralized solution to retrieve these packages, these dependencies that JavaScript applications have. And then all programming languages have the same basic issue. And so if we can solve it with JavaScript, it's a step towards solving it in a general fashion for all programming languages. So what I wanted to do in this video is give an overview of these research notes. They're here for anybody to read, but video is a little bit more information rich, and so it might be easier for people to digest this video than to just digest the written part of it. So to start with in this research, let me introduce, this is the grant application for the package manager that was approved by Radicle. And so this is what kicked off this research. So it's here if anybody wants to get the background on this research. I'm going to focus on these research notes, but that grant application's there if anybody wants to read it. To start with, in order to explore this idea of could Radicle deliver these sort of packages, these dependencies that JavaScript programs require, I created two code repositories. One's called add, and it's a very simple library that just adds two numbers together. And then the second one is called test add, and that just exercises the add library, make sure that it's running properly. It has the add library as a dependency. And so that's really what the scope of this research is could that dependency simply live on Radicle and not have to live on NPM? And so here is the Radicle repository for the add library. So there's the URL if you need to find it. It's also linked in this gist, which you can find at gist.github.com under my username Chris Troutner, and the title of the gist is Radicle Package Releases Research Notes. And so the add library is pretty simple. I have it here in my text editor, and it's really just one line. You give it two numbers, X and Y, it adds them together and returns the result. So it's very simple because it's just for the purposes of demonstration. And then it exports that as an external library. It has a package.json file. If I was to publish this to NPM, it would have been published under that name, but I did not publish this to NPM. Instead, I just uploaded the code to Radicle, and the point of this exercise was to see if I could include that as a dependency in the test add program. And so here is the test add program. Again, it's a Radicle repository, and in this, here's the code here, and it's again very simple. It's just adding 1 plus 2, and I'm feeding them into the add. I'm including the add library here, and then I'm feeding those two numbers into the add function, and then I'm displaying the results. And so if I run this on the computer, I see that I get the result 3, which is correct. 1 plus 2 equals 3. And so the program's running correctly, but now let's look at the dependencies, because that's really the focus of this research. And actually, I want to go back to the gist, because this was where the devil lies in these details. The conventional way of packaging an npm library is with this npm publish command. And so part of this research was digging in under the hood as to what actually happens there. And what I found is that what it does is it creates a .tgz file, or a tar gunzip file, and that's what ultimately gets uploaded to npm and what gets pulled down when you run npm install. And it's not very hard to generate these tar gunzip files manually. I was able to do that, and that was my first approach, where I was able to add. If you go to the add repository, there's actually the gunzip file right here. And so at first I tried to do that. I tried to just manually include it this way, and that worked. I was able to, but this has a failure in that it assumes that it's looking for a local file. It's not pulling the file down over the internet, which would be the more conventional way to do it. So the more conventional way to do it would be to add it as a URL like this. And if we load this URL, it pulls up a web page. So it's not actually pulling down the file itself. It's pulling down a web page about the file. And so this is a current limitation with Radicle right now, is it is not able to retrieve raw files, a single file from a repository. There's the viewer that we just looked at, and that sort of can show you information about the file, but it's not the file itself. And so this is the more conventional way of adding dependencies, and this is currently not possible with Radicle. And so that's a little unfortunate. This is a feature that could be developed, and I recommend that it does. But this wasn't the end of the research. I dug a little deeper, and in fact, I'll just show this page here. This is linked in the gist. There are several ways to include a package, and one of these ways is a Git URL. And so another way I was able to do this is with this format of a URL right here. So this is leveraging the Git server capabilities of Radicle, and this worked. I was able to include the add library dependency, and this way. And if I look at the package.json file, you can see it here. So by including dependencies in this way, it is actually possible to serve them directly from Radicle, and thereby not have any dependency on GitHub or NPM. And so that's success. That's a big step in the right direction. So I just wanted to explain that in this video. Just to conclude this, the vast majority of the workflow for publishing and servicing packages via Radicle is already in place using that Git format that I showed. So it is possible to actually create JavaScript applications that have code dependencies only in Radicle and not outside of Radicle, like on GitHub or NPM. So that's very exciting. However, it remains to be seen if this approach is general, if it can be applied to other formats. That URL style is, I think, more common, and this Git package may not translate to other package managers and other programming languages. So that just remains to be seen. Also, a later goal in this research is integration with package proxies like Verdaccio. The reason we want to target those is that those essentially eliminate any change to the user experience, so that users they don't have to change anything, especially in a business type scenario. They'll typically set up Verdaccio as a proxy for NPM, so that if NPM goes down, the business can keep working, because Verdaccio acts like a mirror. It mirrors all the NPM repositories that they depend on. So what remains to be seen is if this Git format will work well with Verdaccio, where it can still mirror them even though they're a Git repository and not one of those tar gunzip files. So there's remains to be additional research to be done, but in terms of this first part of the first milestone, I count this as a success and look forward to moving forward.